July 20th, 1944. The summer sun beat down mercilessly on the scorched fields of Normandy, a stark contrast to the cold dread that gripped the hearts of German tank crews. They had, for years, operated under the near-mythical belief that their Panthers and Tigers were impervious to Allied fire, steel behemoths designed to dominate any battlefield. This confidence, forged in the early victories of the Blitzkrieg and hardened by the technological superiority of their armor, was about to be shattered in a most brutal fashion. A new variant of the American Sherman tank, modified by ingenious British engineers, was about to introduce a terrifying reality to the German high command. Their invincible machines bled steel and fire just like any other. The genesis of this German arrogance was not without merit. From the dust-choked plains of Poland in 1939 to the vast, frozen expanses of the Soviet Union, German armored divisions had consistently outmaneuvered and outgunned their adversaries. The early Panzer I and II, though lightly armed, proved devastatingly effective in concert with revolutionary blitzkrieg tactics. As the war progressed, German engineers, driven by Hitler's obsession with superior weaponry, began producing tanks that truly redefined battlefield dominance. The Panzer IV, constantly upgraded, became a reliable workhorse, but it was the Panther and Tiger that truly instilled fear. The Tiger I, with its formidable 88mm KWK-36L/56 gun and thick, sloped armor, was a nightmare for Allied tank crews. Its initial encounters on the Eastern Front, where it decimated Soviet T-34s and KV-1s, quickly cemented its legendary status. A single Tiger could hold off an entire company of enemy tanks, its shells ripping through armor that Allied guns could only dent. Allied reports from North Africa and Italy spoke of Tigers shrugging off hits, their crews seemingly impervious to the desperate efforts of British and American tankers. This reputation preceded them, casting a long, dark shadow over every battlefield where they appeared. The Panther, a later design, offered a blend of the Tiger's heavy armament, a potent 7.5 cm KWK-42L/70 gun, and improved mobility, wrapped in even more effectively sloped armor. Its frontal plate was virtually impenetrable to most Allied guns at standard combat ranges. German tank commanders, often veterans of multiple campaigns, truly believed they were driving the finest fighting machines on Earth. They had witnessed their shells pierce the armor of M4 Shermans and Churchill tanks with frightening ease, while enemy rounds ricocheted harmlessly off their own hulls. This perception of invincibility became deeply ingrained within the Wehrmacht's armored corps. Across the English Channel, however, a different kind of ingenuity was at work. The American M4 Sherman, though reliable and produced in vast numbers, was found wanting in direct confrontations with the newer German heavy tanks. Its standard 75mm gun, while effective against Panzer IVs and infantry, struggled to penetrate the frontal armor of Panthers and Tigers. British tank crews, facing these formidable German machines in North Africa and Italy, often found themselves at a severe disadvantage, a fact that led to growing frustration and mounting casualties. The disparity was clear and alarming. The problem lay in firepower. While the Sherman was mobile and mechanically sound, its main gun lacked the muzzle velocity and projectile mass to consistently punch through the thick, hardened steel of German heavy tanks. Attempts to outgun the Sherman with a more powerful American 76mm gun offered some improvement, but still left much to be desired against the heavily armored German beasts. The British, ever practical and innovative, realized that a more radical solution was needed, and they possessed the perfect weapon for the task: the 17-pounder anti-tank gun. The 17-pounder was a British marvel, a gun with a terrifyingly high muzzle velocity and the ability to fire armor-piercing discarding sabot (APDS) rounds. It could pierce the frontal armor of a Panther at considerable range and even crack open a Tiger. The challenge was fitting this enormous weapon into the relatively small turret of the Sherman tank. It was a task that seemed almost impossible, requiring extensive modifications to the turret itself, a redesign of the internal ammunition storage, and even a repositioning of the radio equipment. The men of the Royal Tank Regiment and the Royal Ordnance factories worked tirelessly, driven by the urgent need to counter the German armored threat. They discovered that by rotating the gun's breech and modifying the recoil system, They could just squeeze the formidable weapon into the Sherman's existing turret ring. The result was a cramped but incredibly potent machine, affectionately nicknamed the Firefly, due to the spectacular muzzle flash of its powerful gun. This new variant looked almost identical to a standard Sherman, a critical factor in deceiving German tank commanders. The first Fireflies began rolling off production lines in late 1943, though their deployment to combat units was a carefully managed secret. The intention was to unleash these powerful tanks at a critical moment, to deliver a shock that would undermine the German belief in their armored superiority. Normandy, with its hedgerows and rolling terrain, provided the perfect crucible for this baptism of fire. The Allied invasion, Operation Overlord, was to be a test not only of logistics and infantry resolve, but also of armored doctrine and technological innovation. As the Allied armies pushed inland from the beaches of Normandy in the weeks following D-Day, they immediately encountered the full might of German armored resistance. The terrain, crisscrossed with dense hedgerows known as the bocage, proved ideal for defensive warfare. German panthers and tigers, often dug in or concealed, lay in ambush, picking off advancing Allied tanks with methodical precision. For every panther or tiger destroyed, the Allies often lost several Shermans. The psychological toll on Allied tank crews was immense. The arrival of the Firefly in significant numbers began to subtly shift the balance. Allied commanders, keenly aware of the psychological advantage the Germans held, often deployed Fireflies strategically, interspersing them among platoons of standard Shermans. Their distinctive long barrel, a dead giveaway, was often camouflaged or deliberately obscured to maintain the illusion of a regular Sherman. The idea was to draw out the German heavy tanks, allowing the Firefly to deliver a decisive blow before the enemy realized they were facing a different kind of adversary. One of the most dramatic early encounters involving the Firefly occurred on June 13, 1944, just days after D-Day. Near the village of Villers-Bocage, the legendary German tank ace, Michael Wittmann, commanding a Tiger I, launched a devastating ambush against elements of the British 7th Armored Division. In a furious 15-minute engagement, Wittmann's Tiger Company destroyed numerous British tanks and vehicles. It was a stark reminder of the Tiger's lethality and the fear it instilled. Yet, even in this chaotic encounter, Fireflies were present, exchanging fire, though Wittmann ultimately disengaged. It was in the relentless push through the Norman countryside, amidst the endless hedgerows and small villages, that the true potential of the Firefly would be fully realized. German tank crews, confident in their heavy armor, would often engage standard Shermans, believing they could withstand any return fire. This overconfidence was precisely what the Firefly crews exploited. They would lie in wait, concealed behind a hedgerow or in a copse of trees, allowing their comrades in regular Shermans to draw the enemy's attention. Then, with a flash and a roar, the 17-pounder would speak. The first time a German tanker witnessed a Firefly round penetrate the frontal armor of a Panther or Tiger, the shock was profound. Oberleutnant Karl-Heinz Kessler, a Panther commander with the Panzerlehr Division, recalled the moment with a chilling clarity. His platoon had ambushed a column of British Shermans near Caen. "We had them," he recounted years later, his voice still tinged with disbelief. "Our shells were bouncing off their front plates, as usual. Then, one of them, it looked just like the others, fired. A flash, a sound like a hammer blow, and suddenly our lead Panther was burning, an explosion tearing through its turret." Kessler's description was echoed by countless others. The belief in invincibility, painstakingly cultivated over years of battlefield dominance, began to unravel. German tank crews had grown accustomed to the comforting thud of Allied shells ricocheting off their armor, the knowledge that they could withstand a barrage and still deliver a lethal counterblow. The Firefly shattered this illusion. It introduced a new, terrifying variable into the equation, a tank that looked innocuous but carried a deadly punch. The psychological impact was as significant as the physical destruction it wrought. The legend of the Firefly grew with each destroyed German tank. Reports began filtering through German lines, initially dismissed as Allied propaganda, but soon confirmed by the grim reality of burning Panthers and Tigers. German commanders, once so confident, were forced to acknowledge that the Allies now possessed a tank capable of challenging their armored superiority. They began to issue new orders, emphasizing caution when engaging Shermans, particularly those with a distinctive long barrel. The battlefield psychology had irrevocably shifted. The most famous engagement involving the Firefly, one that cemented its reputation, occurred on August 8, 1944, during Operation Totalize. Major David Curry, commanding a squadron of Fireflies from the 27th Canadian Armored Regiment, faced a determined counterattack by elements of the 12th SS Panzer Division, Hitlerjugend south of Cannes. The Germans, with their veteran Panther crews, were attempting to block the Allied advance. Curry's Fireflies, along with other Allied armor, were dug in defensively, awaiting the assault. As the Panthers advanced, their crews confident in their heavy armor, the Canadian Fireflies opened fire. The 17-pounder rounds ripped through the German tanks, one after another. Curry himself accounted for several Panthers, his Firefly delivering precise, devastating shots. The German counterattack faltered and then collapsed, leaving a trail of burning wrecks. The shock of facing an Allied tank that could so easily destroy their formidable Panthers demoralized the SS crews. It was a resounding victory for the Firefly and a brutal lesson for the German tankers. The design of the Firefly was not without its drawbacks. The sheer size of the 17-pounder meant that the internal space of the turret was severely restricted, making ammunition handling difficult and reducing the number of rounds that could be carried. The muzzle flash, while impressive, often blinded the gunner and commander for a moment after firing, making follow-up shots or rapid engagement of multiple targets challenging. The Firefly also carried a crew of 4 instead of the usual 5, as the co-driver's position was sacrificed for ammunition storage. Yet, these sacrifices were deemed acceptable given the enormous tactical advantage the Firefly provided. British and Commonwealth tank crews, once plagued by an inferiority complex when facing German heavy armor, now felt they had a fighting chance. Sergeant Fred McPherson of the Scots Guards, a Firefly gunner, recalled the moment he first successfully engaged a Panther. "We saw it, lurking behind a hedgerow. Our commander ordered us to hold fire until it committed. When it moved into the open, I put a round right through its front plate. It brewed up like a kettle. I tell you, mate, that was a damn good feeling after all the tigers we'd lost." The conversations among German tank crews began to reflect this new, grim reality. No longer did they speak with unwavering certainty about the invulnerability of their machines. Instead, discussions often turned to identifying the long-barreled Shermans, the dreaded Fireflies. They learned to prioritize these targets, understanding that a Firefly represented a far greater threat than the regular Sherman. Ambush tactics, once primarily the domain of the Germans, were now used against them, forcing them to advance with greater caution and to constantly scan for the telltale signs of the 17-pounder. The impact of the Firefly extended beyond direct combat. It forced German commanders to reconsider their armored tactics. No longer could they rely on their heavy tanks to simply roll over Allied resistance. They had to be more careful, more methodical, and more aware of the changing capabilities of their adversaries. The psychological edge, once firmly in German hands, had begun to erode. The Firefly became a symbol of Allied technological catch-up, a clear indication that the tide of the war was turning, not just in terms of numbers, but also in terms of battlefield innovation. As the Allies broke out of Normandy and pushed into France, the Firefly continued to prove its worth in countless engagements. From the desperate fighting in the Falaise Pocket, where German armies were encircled and decimated, to the liberation of towns and cities, the Firefly was a constant presence, punching above its weight and delivering crucial blows against formidable German opposition. It became an integral part of the Allied armored force, a specialist tank whose specific purpose was to hunt and destroy the heaviest German armor. The German response to the Firefly, while initially one of shock and disbelief, eventually led to tactical adjustments. They began to deploy their heavy tanks with greater support from infantry and anti-tank guns, understanding that a lone Panther or Tiger was no longer a guaranteed victor against an Allied tank platoon. They also prioritized targeting the Fireflies, attempting to knock them out early in an engagement. However, the sheer numbers of Shermans, combined with the Firefly's ability to blend in, often made this difficult. The ultimate fate of the German tank corps was sealed not just by the Firefly, but by a combination of factors: overwhelming Allied air superiority, relentless numerical superiority in tanks and artillery, and the sheer logistical challenges of maintaining their advanced machinery. Yet, the Firefly played a unique and critical role in breaking the myth of German armored invincibility. It was a direct, powerful counter to the psychological and material advantages the Germans had enjoyed for so long. By the end of the war, an estimated 2,200 Fireflies had been produced, a relatively small number compared to the tens of thousands of standard Shermans, but each one was a crucial asset. They served with distinction in British, Canadian, Polish, and other Commonwealth units, earning the respect of their crews and the fear of their enemies. The Firefly was a testament to British ingenuity and a grim warning to German engineers that their technological edge was not insurmountable. The belief held by Nazi engineers that their tanks were invincible was a dangerous hubris, born of early successes and fostered by their technological prowess. They had created machines of war that were indeed formidable, inspiring awe and terror in their enemies. But in the crucible of Normandy, against the ingenuity and determination of Allied engineers and tank crews, that belief was shattered. The Sherman Firefly, an unassuming American tank with a powerful British heart, proved that even the mightiest of steel behemoths could be brought to their knees. The final reflection on the Firefly is not just about its firepower, but about its symbolism. It represented the moment when the Allies truly began to dominate the armored battlefield. It was a clear signal that the era of German tank supremacy was over, replaced by an Allied force capable of meeting any armored threat head-on. The psychological victory achieved by the Firefly was perhaps as important as the physical destruction it wrought, dismantling the confidence of German tank crews and forcing them to confront a harsh new reality. The Invincible tanks of the Third Reich, once the pride of their engineers, proved to be nothing more than steel and fire, vulnerable to the right weapon in the right hands. The long barrel of the Firefly cast a long shadow, indeed, a shadow of doubt and eventual defeat over the once confident German panzer divisions.